Okay, welcome everybody to the second holding of the Game Dev Squad or Game Art Chat or whatever this decides to be. Community held event, right? So again, these events are supposed to be held by you guys about something that you're very passionate about and something that you can teach or bring to the table. This is something that's going to help you out a lot in the future. It's great skills and practice to start attending and actually just kind of presenting your work. And honestly, kind of gets a lot of other people kind of like excited for some other things. So I'm happy you guys are here, and I can't wait to see any other people who decides to like show up and want to do that. So again, I have a link for that in the server announcements. I will probably send this out again just in case if you guys want to do another one or do it, sign up for it if you have already done one. So Daphne, if you want to do it again, completely do it. Go ahead and sign up for another topic if you want to. That's the other big thing. But with that out of the way, today we actually have our beloved and amazing Amanda giving a little bit of a talk on vertex painting and oh god, what was the vertex painting and tiling textures. So again, if you guys can, try to keep muted. If you have questions, either put them in the chat and then I can try to vet them to Amanda. But let's try to let Amanda finish the presentation, and then at the end we can have questions if you guys have them. Okay. So again, without further ado, Amanda, I'm going to hand it off to you, and we'll just have a fun time.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for everybody for coming in. I just linked the presentation in the chat, so everybody should be able to view it if you want to follow that way or just access it later, because there are plenty of resources in here as well. But trim sheets, tiling textures, and vertex painting today. And the reason why I'm kind of addressing trim sheets and tiling textures as well, just because they go pretty hand in hand with what you kind of need for vertex painting. So we're going to be going over just like briefly what a tiling texture is, what trim sheets are, also obviously what vertex painting is, and also how to set that up in Unreal Engine 4. But it is also applicable with Unreal Engine 5. And with Unity, it's a similar setup, but not quite the same. And we'll wrap things up with the resources I have, some contact info, and Q&A. So, for anybody who doesn't know who I am, I'm Amanda Melville. I am a 3D environment artist. I specifically focus on stylized environments, and I'm currently working at a company called QSAI, which is a third-party company for Ford Motor Company out in Saline, Michigan. And primarily, what QSAI does is focus on AI autonomous vehicle simulations and kind of the engineering aspect behind that. I pretty much focus on a similar pipeline to game art, actually, focusing on creating the environments for those simulations. Also, if anybody doesn't know, just a little fun fact about me is I'm really into the series Legend of Zelda. It's one of my reasons why I kind of got into 3D and just kind of what sparked that motivation for me wanting to pursue this career. So if anybody's interested, I also have my socials and some other goodies. Just if you want to keep up to date or contact me later or just to have another connection, um, they're all available right there. What we're going to be talking about today again is the base understanding of what vertex painting is in Unreal Engine, how we can use it, when you should use it, why you should use it, and kind of go into different scenarios where it can be beneficial. Um, so there's kind of a lot you can do with it, but I'm going to be trying to focus on just exposing everybody to what you can do with this tool that's available, and also is pretty popular in a lot of game development. So, kind of going into tiling textures, this one's a little bit easier to kind of wrap your head around. It's pretty much just a patterning material. So, really, anything that goes from up, down, left, and right, and tiles perfectly without any weird seams, and you can increase the patterning amount or decrease it as much as you want. Pretty straightforward, and kind of how you would do this for UVs and texturing is pretty dang easy. It's much easier in my opinion than having to uniquely unwrap something. Um, a lot of the times with tiling textures and UV shells, you can typically stack your UV shells, which is a big no-no in a lot of other cases with unique assets or hero assets. So it's a lot less thinking about, okay, how do I play Tetris rather than, okay, I just have to fit it in this box. And the best part about it too is you can actually go outside your one-to-one UV box with the tiling texture if you want it to pattern more. Kind of in this example, actually, right here. So, special thanks to Alejandro for this reference, but this is pretty much what's happening. They're scaling their UV shells right now, and what that's doing is increasing and decreasing the amount it's tiling in. So it's again just something to be mindful of and consider of how you can use this and when you should use it. And kind of going into the little bit more complex idea behind trim sheets. Um, Trim sheets are a way of texturing. They're also a way of combining separate textures into a single sheet. So rather than having my whole big one-to-one square be just one large pattern, I can actually have 5 or 6 or 7 or how really ever many I want in there and really use that in an efficient way so it's more optimal for your game engine, whether that be Unreal or Unity. Um, so it's something that's really sought after with game devs and kind of what they're looking for environment artists, at least that I'm aware of. So it's something kind of good to get familiar with. Also, it makes doing a bigger scene a lot less daunting and it, a lot less really demanding in terms of how much you need to do. So it's something I personally use all the time when I can. In any scenario, I rather do a trim sheet for almost an entire scene and uniquely texture one or two things. Um, and also with both tiling textures and trim sheets, something you do want to be mindful of is when you are preparing yourself to do your UVs and get ready to export it, you want to make sure that your UVs are as straight as possible. Otherwise, your textures aren't going to lay really nicely. I know this is something that's kind of addressed with unique assets to have your UV shells as straight as possible. This is something you kind of want to also just have a good habit of and always just try to get those UV shells as straight as possible because of situations like this where your textures are tiling and they're either vertically or horizontally tiling and you need them to follow that straight strip for them to show up properly. Um, so that's something I really kind of wanted to bring up because I feel like this is something that was difficult for me personally to kind of wrap my head around, as well as kind of just not feeling right about, bending and twisting your faces of your UV shells. So it's something that's a little daunting at first, but really getting into the habit early on is really helpful for just future headaches. And oops, kind of showing off what the trim sheet looks like. So we have the same reference from before where all your UV shells are as straight as possible, and you can kind of see more of what's happening here and how it's working to really um, make this feel much more than just a plain pillar. And you're doing it in a really effective way that is just a something that's really beneficial to showcase. So here you can kind of see you have your top strip, your second strip, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and also some caps. So kind of using this as a reference is beneficial, at least again for me when I was learning, even now, just to kind of understand, okay, this is how I should be laying it out. And this is something again where you can go outside of your one-to-one UV box as well as stack your shells because you're not baking anything. There's no conflict with your normals or anything like that or that weird nastiness. You can pretty much avoid having to go into Substance Painter altogether and really have a faster workflow with a little few with less steps than you would normally going in between programs. So now that we kind of have like a good understanding or at least a basis of what we kind of need for vertex painting, we're gonna go into exactly what this is and how we can use it. So vertex painting, according to Wikipedia, the super technical way of putting it is essentially modifying 3D viewport on a perspective view of a rotated mode. So what that pretty much means is your vertexes that pretty much make the geometry of your mesh is what you are painting on. And this is allowing you to take two different textures completely and start blending them together to help kind of get rid of some repetition or kind of really add a little bit more uniqueness to your scene. I personally find this just really fun and also something that is really easy so I don't have to go in between different programs and have to do 27 different textured rocks when I can just have vertex painting, have all my rocks in the scene, and just start going to town and mucking up whatever I want. So it's a really, again, a nice way to kind of just break up some repetition. And to kind of give a clear example of what it's doing, here in this reference I have somebody vertex painting over a model in real time, and next to it are the UVs, so you kind of see exactly what's going on with how it's painting over that directly. This might be a little hard to kind of wrap your head around to like look at the UVs as well. You don't have to. It's just something that might be helpful for others. So just kind of thinking about that and how it's affecting your model and how it's all connected. But so kind of after getting a brief explanation of what vertex painting is and we have our materials together, we have to set up the material itself in Unreal, which could be a bit daunting for some folks because the blueprinting aspect of even like material blueprinting can be a bit intimidating, but it's really just a way to kind of visually represent coding in a sense and a way to kind of have a lot of control over certain aspects of your scene in Unreal. So pretty much what's going on here in this material blueprint of the vertex painting material, we pretty much have a base and tiling coordinates, and really what those are doing is it's plugged into certain texture sample nodes into the UVs. And what that's doing is that these base coordinates right here are telling these UVs of these texture samples to repeat X amount of times. And your default of this texture coordinate node will automatically be set to 1. So that means 1 time. So it's not going to be tiling, but if you up it to 2, 3, then it's going to tile 2, 3, 4 times, etc. So it's a really quick way of, oh, I really like how this material's looking, but I really want to see it patterning, but I don't really want to go back to whatever program I used to create this in to have to make it pattern more. So this is just a quick way of doing that, and I personally use this all the time. It's saves so much time and so much going back and forth. So I thought it was a pretty good thing to point out. And the bread and butter of really the whole material setup is what's happening is that the R channel of the Vertex color node is being used, and then that's in it of itself. That R channel is getting plugged into the alpha of the lerp nodes, and what lerp nodes pretty much are is just adding materials together, um, and it's something I personally use really only for vertex painting. There are other aspects where I use it in. Um, but what the R channel is doing to this alpha of this node is pretty much telling that when we vertex paint, that we want to paint with the R channel. So it's kind of, again, like a sense of coding, but in a visual way. Um, but you get a lot of control with this. So since we still have the green and blue channel, we still have other options to also add more texture samples if we want. So if we want to blend more than 2 materials, you're totally welcome to do that. You can blend 3, 4, 3 or 4 materials if you want. And so it's pretty effective kind of when you want to get more of a blend effect. And right down here are the textures that are being used for the vertex painting. So a lot of the times when I am kind of discussing or using vertex painting, a lot of the times some scenarios where I'll use it just to kind of solidify the idea behind it is that I will use vertex painting for, say, a tiling texture for a rock or a stone. And then I'll also create a moss or grass texture. And I'll start using vertex painting, and I'll lerp those 2 nodes together, and pretty much I'll just have it so I can blend the materials really nicely together and get more of that subtle, natural kind of feel, rather than having your 2 materials just cut off at a weird, like, straight line. Um, there are also other scenarios where you can use this as well, of course, with like ground or dirt textures and like a grass texture if you kind of want like a beaten up path, sand and grass, sand and dirt. So there's, again, tons of different ways to use this, and pretty much you can vertex paint on anything with vertices. And I'll kind of show you what happens when we get to the demo. Actually, right now, what happens if you don't have enough vertexes for vertex painting and kind of what you're looking for. So the first thing you want to do is open up Unreal. And pretty much I just have my demo scene, just like the starter content in here. Um, and I really just kind of want to go over completely and show you guys how to set this up and how it works. So the first thing you want to do is once you get into your scene, you want to grab the textures you want to import. So here I have a dirt texture, a grass texture, sand texture, and a trim sheet. And I only have the base colors and the normals and also an opacity map. So we're just going to take all of these, and when you import into Unreal, you can do file import. Personally, I just like to drag and drop, much easier. And sometimes you'll get this notification where it's just saying, hey, you imported a normal map. We're just going to mark it as a normal map. Usually they'll just go away. So now that we have our textures in here, now we can get to the good stuff. First things first, it drives me mad if I don't have anything not organized. So I usually, even before I import, I usually will set up my naming conventions. And I'm just going to set it up for how I would any other scene, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how I personally like to organize. Typically I make 4 different folders and I label them 00 underscore blueprint, 00 underscore textures, 0 02 underscore materials. And I don't think I'll be importing any meshes, but I will still add a mesh category. So, and typically I'll have these in a separate folder from the starter content and also my test, but I'm just going to take these, drag them into the respective folder, open that up. Awesome. So now we're going to make the material of it, and I'm going to blend this dirt texture and this grass texture together. So you go right click, material, and I always name my materials M underscore, we are doing vertex painting. I'll just put vertex painting for now. If this was just a normal project, I would probably just name it ground texture, because if I'm using a grass and a dirt texture combined, typically that's just like how I will remember it, what it is. So to open your material, just double click. Got this open, and it's a completely clean slate. And what we're going to want to do is go into our textures. I'm going to grab my dirt, my grass, and those normals and just drag them on in. And what we're going to do is just kind of organize it real quick. Again, I'm like really picky on organization, but I also think it's really important, and also important to, if you want to showcase any of your blueprint material setups or just anything really, like it's a lot nicer to see something just a little bit more put together. So now that we have this, I'm going to right click, and that's going to pull up your search bar. Then I'm going to start typing in vertex color. This will give us our vertex colored node. And here we go. I'm going to put my colors together, my normals together. And if you ever forget which one's which, as long as you name them correctly or name them in a way that makes sense for you, you should be able to, once you click on it, see what it is. And get a lerp node. You can either do right click, type in lerp, and do it that way. I personally like to hold L and right click, and that will automatically pull up your lerp node. It's just a quick, easy shortcut that I personally like to use. So we're going to do L, right click again. Got another lerp node. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your dirt, plug it into your A, take it into your grass, plug it into your B. And then I personally like to keep my textures kind of in the same way. So like if I have the dirt on top for my base color, I'll typically have my dirt on top for my normal, just because it's easier for my brain to remember that without having to check every day and time. So now we're going to take our red channel from our vertex color, plug it into this alpha of this lerp. And do that again with your base color. And plug this into your base color. Plug this into my normal. And since I don't have a metallic or roughness, I'm just going to do a quick parameter or constant. You can either type in constant, get it that way. It's just pretty much a node with a value. You can either type it in that way or hold down 1 and left click, and that should also give you a quick constant. So typically if I don't have a metallic or roughness, I'll still just do this just to kind of get the desired look I want. So I'll get a couple of constant nodes. Again, hold down 1 and left click, get you a constant node. And then I'll put this into my roughness, and typically I'll crank my roughness up to like 0.8 or something, and I'll typically just leave my metallic at 0. So this is a way if you hand paint your textures and don't have a roughness or metallic map or don't want to make one really, this is a way to kind of avoid that but still get the desired look you want. And also, I know I'm not gonna care for how much this tiles, but I will come back to that and I will show you how we can get that to tile more. So this is pretty much all you need for your vertex color. Before we go out and start painting, I'm just going to quickly organize this a little bit more by pressing C, and that will get you a comment box, and you can then organize it and change your comment color however you want. It's just a little bit nicer and a little bit more easy to kind of understand what's going on. So you can highlight what you want to be in your comment box, press C, and it will appear, base color, and then do that, C, normal. We could even do it for these guys too. Roughness, give it a little bit more space. It's nice too because when you drag them, it'll automatically drag whatever is in it too. So it's a nice easy way to kind of shift things around if you need to as well. Metallic. Okay. So get that. Bam, bam. Awesome. So now we're going to save this and go back out to our scene. And now our material, let's get it right in here. Now, when I apply this material on here, I should be able to vertex paint. So I'm going to apply it to this ground here. Looks pretty good. It's going to automatically put one of the textures on there, but we can obviously change that. And how you do that is you go up to your top bar of Unreal, go to your modes, go down to mesh paint, and select the mesh that has your vertex color on there. And then you want to go in your mode toolbar and paint. And I'm also very sorry if anybody can hear the howling huskies in the background. But now with our paint selected, our mesh selected that we want to vertex paint, we should be able to vertex paint. So if you go here and you just start kind of painting, it'll start blending that material together with one another. And if you want to easily and quickly switch your colors, you can just go over here and switch them. Personally, I like the shortcut X. It's just easier, so pressing X will kind of get what you want. But I kind of want this to tile just a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my material, and then I'm going to make a texture coordinate. And what this allows us to do, again, is kind of just tile our textures more. So it's really effective with anything that has a tiling texture already. It's not as effective, of course, with unique textures or tiling textures, or I'm sorry, trim sheets. So trim sheets and unique textures will not work well with a texture coordinate, but tiling textures will. So right, obviously I have my tiling textures here, and it's automatically set to U tiling 1, V tiling 1. And so this is nice too because it also gives you the option to allow tiling more in the vertical, in the V axis or more of the U axis. So personally, I always keep them the same. I always just want my tiling textures to appear how I want. So we want to just tile a little bit more, twice as much. So once you kind of put those parameters in, you take this node and you plug it into whatever texture you want it to affect. And be sure to plug it in to whatever texture sample that is associated with that texture. So that base color and that normal. And you can even see it even change the little viewport. Control Z, and then you plug it right back in. And you can see it's even tiling there. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually apply this.
Amanda, you still there?
Oh, can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Now we can.
All right, so I wanted to go ahead and plug it into my grass texture as well, and my grass normal. And just so we can get it to tile twice as much for all of everything. Save that, and when we go back here, it should be, yep, a lot more tileable. So that's a pretty just fun feature to kind of mess around with and think about how you can use it and just kind of what you can use it for and kind of the steps you might be able to save. And something I do want to point out with too is when you're vertex painting, something to be mindful of is, again, it's vertex painting. So if a mesh doesn't have a lot of vertexes, like if it's only a 4-sided or 6-sided cube, it's not gonna have that much information to be able to paint on. So like you can kind of see that here, even like me selecting this mesh, and you can even see with your vertex painting brush these dots that will appear. Right now you can only see one because that's the only vertex that's there. So these green dots represent those individual vertexes that you're actually painting on. So right now you can see, yeah, there's not much information here that we can do really anything with. So in that case, I'm actually just going to go to the starter content and go to the props that they have. And they have this really lovely rock that has clearly a lot more vertices to work with. So obviously you can see there's a lot more green dots in my brush area. And what that's pretty much saying is there's a lot more information to be able to work with here. So if I want to demonstrate what's going on here or demonstrate me using vertex painting on this mesh, I have to go back into my materials. And you can either click and drag it directly on the mesh like that, or you can click and drag it into your details bar on the right, whichever your preference is. So again, it's going to give us that base grass, and if I just start painting, it'll automatically start giving us that ground. and it's kind of harsh right now. I kind of want it to blend a little bit more. So you can start really playing with like the strength here on the left side toolbar. Start playing with that a little bit, and you can adjust the fall off as well. I'm gonna crank down my brush just a little bit, get a little bit more details in there, get that strength down. Okay, so now I can go in there. And also you will have a lot more control if you're using a Wacom or a Cintiq or something and not a mouse. Just saying, I am using a mouse right now. It works, but don't recommend. But I have a lot more control now of what's happening. And say I want just my other texture on here. I can just go ahead and hit this fill button, and it's going to fill whatever texture I have selected, or I'm sorry, whatever paint color I have selected. And if I hit X to swap to my dirt and hit fill, it'll give me that nice dirt texture all over. And I can hit X again to switch my color and just like start going in there, start adding some information. And like I'm gonna be using the same textures and the same models to get really dramatic different outcomes to what's going on, without having to make a whole bunch of everything. Like I don't have to texture all these individual rocks and then make sure their UVs are good. I can have their UVs set up for tiling textures and just kind of have fun with it. You can even like duplicate this and oops, let's go back into select mode. With the same rock, you can just like even, oh gosh, you can get just so much different outcomes with the same models. Go back into your mesh mode, make sure whichever model you want to vertex paint is selected. Go into your paint tab. I want it to fill. Oops. I want it to fill. There we go. And I want to swap my colors with X, and I'm going to just paint some other information on here. Maybe this rock hasn't been here as long. And you can like think about your narrative when you're doing this too. And you could even like add a darker dirt texture down here to kind of show it being there for a while. Again, you can do multiple textures with vertex painting, and it's just kind of a relaxing way to get like immediate results in your scene and have like quickly different and dramatic effects. But yeah, so and pretty much I can at a later time go over vertex painting if it's still confusing with unique textures, but really you can do this same exact process like with something that has like its own set of its own UV set, or if it's a trim sheet, you can still be able to use this in that manner. It's just you have to make sure whatever model that you are using it for has to be properly UV'd for that unique texture or trim sheet. And you can pretty much plug it in the same way. Like, I'll just quickly, I have nothing with this trim sheet available, but if you quickly, it's just the same exact setup. If I'd plug this in here. This is gonna look really funny. I'm actually not gonna have that tile. Delete this. Quickly just show this off really quick. Delete this. And plug that in here. Plug that in here. And also, if you have something that has a texture map that doesn't need to be blended with something, you can just go right ahead. Make sure this is properly set to masked. If you're using an opacity texture or anything like that, or whatever texture, or translucent if you need the opacity instead of opacity mask. And what you're going to do is you need to make sure you still set up a lerp node, and you still need this R channel going in here. And you want to make sure that this matches with the other lerp nodes where your trim sheet is going in. So if it's an A with your base color, an A with your normal, you're going to want, even though it's not blending with anything, you still want it to go to that lerp node. So this vertex color node is telling it, yes, we want it to be a part of this texture, but we only want it to affect this this color channel of vertex painting. Go ahead and just plug that in there. We don't need anything in the B. We're going to save that. And theoretically, if these were UV'd for these trim sheets, maybe I can find a better example. If these were properly set up for this trim sheet, then it would work just as effective. Go here, go to content, materials, throw that on there, and go back into mesh painting, selected, paint, and I'm gonna just fill it with the trim sheet. So if this theoretically again was UV'd properly for this trim sheet, it would work perfectly fine and keep this information. You would just want to make sure that you have it filled with the trim sheet of whatever you're using, and you can then, go in. Oh shoot. There we go. You can then go in and start painting over it. And say you want, like, you have this trim sheet on a column and it's using all these bricks, but I want these bricks to have a little bit of moss. You can go in there and just muck it up a little bit. I know this is kind of a rudimentary way of showcasing how to use a trim sheet for vertex painting, but it is possible. Same with unique textures. So yeah, there's quite a bit you can do with this. And I typically, again, I'll use this a lot of the times for my scenes. I'll typically make a couple of trim sheets. I'll make 1 or 2 tiling textures, and I just go in and paint away and just add more details of whatever I want. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of how you go ahead and use this for really any type of capacity that you want to use it in. It can be used in characters, it can be used in environments. Personally, I've never used it on a character, but like I've showed in this previous example, some folks can and do, even though this is a demonstration. So kind of wrapping up a little bit, there are some resources more in depth about these topics because, I did kind of go over quite a few different areas. I wanted to make sure to include a few resources outside of what I talked about because I do think it's really important to kind of get information from different sources to kind of help retain that concept a little bit better. There's also some awesome resources on trim sheets and tiling textures, as well as UVing for tiling textures and trim textures. Because, I didn't quite go in depth with those concepts, but I really just wanted to at least supply these resources if you're unfamiliar with them at all. But I really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to kind of what my demonstration was with Vertex painting. And just remember, there's always going to be so many different ways how to do things, and there's a bunch of sources and tools and programs out there that can do all of the same thing and also so many different things at once. So, just try to take it step by step and, play around with the idea and really explore what's available and what's out there, because I do think that's a really important thing to be mindful of, is that there's never going to be one right way. It could be one right way for you if that's what you're comfortable with, but what works for you doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. So please, if you guys have any questions outside of this demonstration, you can feel free to message me on Discord or shoot me an email, either one, and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. But yeah, with that, if anybody has any questions kind of about what I covered, now is the time. And again, I appreciate it,
Neat.
everybody.
Thank you, Amanda, for the amazing presentation. I'm clapping my hands, but not trying to do it in the mic. So thank you again.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So again, if anybody has a question, you can either write it in the chat or just unmute yourself and just kind of ask it away, right? This is a good time to just kind of like vet some things out, which is really great. I think the first question I'll have for you, Amanda, is something that would be probably pretty cool. Is like, do you think you could potentially have two different trim sheets and blend between the two different trim sheets with Vertex painting?
Oh. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I've never personally did that, but yeah, I bet you could. I mean, as long as something was properly UV'd for both of those trim sheets and set up, it'd be a lot of planning, but I think if you set up your trim sheets side to side and kind of plan it out how you would vertex paint them prior to actually doing it, I think that'd be really, really cool, and I think would blow a few people's minds. Like if I saw that in somebody's portfolio, I'd be like, how and what? But yeah, that would be really cool, and I'm sure, and I know that's probably very much capable of everybody that's in this
Mm-hmm.
chat. Actually, is definitely capable of doing that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, does anybody else have any questions? Love to hear it. It looks like Eli's got a question. Can you prepare a Vertex mask in Photoshop like an alpha?
Oh, sorry, you were cutting out a little bit. What was that?
Can you prepare a Vertex mask in Photoshop like an alpha?
Yeah, like essentially make your textures in Photoshop, I
Is that what
believe.
you're saying, Eli? Yeah, Eli, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Or like the black and white, you know how you can like hand paint an alpha to be like really detailed, but maybe it's like white and just like red, or like the combination of, like if you had like this special trim sheet, you could like cut out stuff with like a vertex mask maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure there is a way you can do that. It's not something I'm necessarily familiar with, but let's see. But I know there is a way where you can pretty much set your individual RGB channels of Photoshop, and I know you can use that with vertex painting. So theoretically, I'm trying to think. Can you pre-make a vertex mask? I think so, but I'm gonna have to look into that. Oh my gosh. Um, ignore the big.
Yeah, It's okay. Yeah, we'll probably come back to that question. It looks like Brian's got another question too. It says
Awesome.
Brian says, "What do you do when you want to vertex paint on a cube/plane anything with low vertices? Are you forced to artificially increase your vertex count, or are there other options?"
So, from what I'm aware, and kind of what I've done in those scenarios, is if I'm just trying to like paint on a plane or something really low geometry, I kind of consider, okay, what do I want to vertex paint? And I will then like manually start adding edge loops or geometry to that space if I know I want to paint it. I'm sure there are more optimal ways of doing it, but as far as I'm aware, that's for vertex painting to actually want to work in Unreal Engine. It wants that information of the vertices to be able to paint on, to be able to blend that information together. So as far as I'm aware, if you want something to paint on, you would need to add more geometry. Just be mindful of how much you want to add, and kind of if it's going to be up close to where a player or a beauty shot or your render is going to be from versus like in the back. So like in the back, I'd probably just have a regular plane with maybe like some vertex painting versus like probably up close in front I'm going to use something with like a lot more verts like this. But yeah, it Unreal just wants that information of that geometry so it can blend them together.
If anybody else has any questions, just blurt out. It's a great conversation time.
So if you have two materials and let's say one of them has like a little bit stronger of like normal data than the other, like let's say one is like kind of like a flatter brick texture and the other one's like on the like a deep cobblestone or something, how do you ensure that they blend well together? Because like that's kind of to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but the way I would perhaps go about it, if my normal map was too much, I would either take it into Photoshop and mess with the filter settings of 3D and the generated normal map. But more than likely, what I would actually do is probably just go back into my material of Unreal and say I kind of want to like get rid of this is too much. Let's just say this is too much information from my normal map. What I could do is I could take like a solid blue color and blend them together with I'd probably like see what a multiply would do and kind of mess around with that and then plug that back into the lerp. So kind of like, oops, oh no, that's not what I want. Oops, color constant, vector parameter. So you want a vector parameter, which you will go in right click vector parameter. And this will, this is what I personally like to use just to get a color in there. And I'll go in, change the name, normal ease or something. And I'll go in and I will turn my blue all the way up. Keep all the other ones down. And I want to take this normal and I want to make it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to see what a multiply node does, and you can either right click, type in multiply, do it that way, or you can hold down M, left click, multiply. And we're just going to see what happens when we blend these together and plug this back into our lerp A. And this might diffuse it too much, but just to kind of get the point across, it's a way of doing it. Yeah, our normals are not here, are not nearly as intense. So to kind of show off what's really going on right now, this is with it multiplying. And if we just plug this back in, hit save, you can see that it got a lot more intense. So that's personally the way I would probably go about it, is just like take a color. I'd probably mess with this color so it wasn't completely solid blue and wasn't affecting it as much. Probably saturate a little bit. But you could do that and multiply them together or lerp them together. Just kind of depends on what results you want, and plug them right back into that previous node, and bam. And again, you can go back into Photoshop and do it that way. But this is just the quick, easy, personally I think easy way, and without going in and out of a bunch of programs.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like Brian asked as well, from your experience, have you seen any major performance drops when you add vertices? What's the performance vertex relationship like?
So personally, I've never, if anything, it helps me with performance, like in my scenes, at least in my experience, specifically because I'm using a lot less textures, and I'm really just using 2 or 3 materials, and I'm just blending them together. So it saves a lot more of pulling information from all over the content browser in Unreal versus like only a few textures being used, and just kind of understanding where I can reuse them from. And if anything, I think vertex painting really helps it kind of pull it all together. But I haven't noticed like specifically any performance issues, but I've only done really smaller like environments on my own, and when I've done it in a bigger game setting, like for my junior projects, I didn't none of us from what I'm aware, none of us experienced any issues with vertex painting causing any performance issues, and we had four separate levels in that game. So as far as I'm aware, I haven't really seen any issues with it. But that could be different from across the board depending on the size of your project.
Yeah, so Brian, I think to add on to that too, game engines are getting a lot smarter about dealing with vertex vertices. So being able to add a couple more vertices here and there to get a better quality image will always outweigh adding another texture sheet into your game project, I would say.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it.
Cool. Do anybody else have some great questions to ask? Or is anybody excited to use this amazing technique now?
Ooh, I'm excited to see what all the game art folks do with their environments with this technique.
Very, very simple.
Heck yeah.
I'll give it my best try. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
Experiment with it a little.
Yeah. Might as well
I will simply
try.
not use it.
Oh,
Or simply not use it.
that's a bummer.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, if you guys have any other questions after the meeting, just you know how to reach out to Amanda. Just send them a text or not text, a message on Discord or an email. But with that, we'll conclude basically our amazing presentation that Amanda gave. So again, round of applause again to Amanda in the chat if you want to. I just clap.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank
So,
you so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for being able to showcase this stuff. Hopefully you guys got a little bit out of this via like, oh wow, there's a lot of extra things that you could potentially do with Unreal and using these different techniques. So it's a great technique to use and understand. It's a great one to really go in and dive deep into. And it's one of those things that will level up your game art experience when you're doing these things. Again,